All right, y'all, welcome, welcome. We'll give a minute or two to have everyone log on and kind of get situated before we get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Great to see so many teachers and organizations logging on right now. Again, really appreciate your involvement and excitement about our topic today. Also appreciate all of the educators who understand the wait time. So making sure everybody has their gear ready to go. All right. Okay, so without further ado, thank you for joining us today. We're going to wait again, or we're going to dive right in. And welcome to the latest installment of Homeroom with Education Leaders. So today we get to talk about After the Bell Rings, shaping policy for out-of-school learning, and very appropriate timing with the end of the school year wrapping up as well and going into summer. My name is Kristen Green. I serve as the Director of K-12 here at the Hunt Institute. For those unfamiliar with the Hunt Institute, we were founded by four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt, and we serve as a resource for policymakers on education issues across the education spectrum through both in-person and virtual convenings. We provide research support, other forms of technical assistance throughout, so today's a great example of what we get to do with some pretty incredible people. So before getting the conversation started, I want to provide a brief logistical overview of what this session is going to look like today. So we'll start the discussion with about a 30-minute moderated discussion with our panelists, and then we'll pivot to Q&A with the audience. So if you have any questions throughout the discussion, submit them using the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to address them during that discussion. You'll see this is more like a conversation than kind of a tit for tat across our session. So we'll record the conversation and post it on our YouTube channel in the next few days. We encourage you to join us on Twitter to continue the conversation using the hashtag #EdHomeroom. Speaking of today's conversation, we are so appreciative of the panelists who are joining us today. So I get the privilege of introducing the three women on our call. We have here Christy Brown, the Chief Academic Officer for the Tennessee Department of Education. Dr. Deanna Townsend-Smith, the Senior Director of the Dudley Flood Center for Education Equity and Opportunity, and Zelda Waymer, President and CEO of the South Carolina After School Alliance. So during our discussion today, it's important to recognize that education extends far beyond the confines of the traditional school day. So after school and out of school programs provide invaluable opportunities for students to engage in these enriching activities, receive academic support, and cultivate those essential skills in a supportive and nurturing environment. So throughout our conversation, we'll explore the critical role of after school and out of school learning in supporting student success, the policy landscape that shapes these initiatives, and the innovative practices being implemented to overcome challenges and maximize impact. So without further ado, thank you for joining us. We're going to jump right in with Christy with our kickoff question. So in your role as Chief Academic Officer, can you talk about any specific initiatives or programs that you've witnessed or led Tennessee through their implementation to support our after school and summer learning opportunities?
Yes, I want to say that as a Chief Academic Officer at Tennessee, I've been in that role for about 9 or 10 months now. So I'm actually leading this work at the department at this point, but I can also speak from the perspective of being our students in a school district being the beneficiary of these after school programs as a former school superintendent prior to taking this role. So good perspective there. There's a lot of benefits to it, and I'm really excited to be on this call and talk about it. So we have 2 longer standing initiatives and investments, frankly, in Tennessee with the after school programming. The first one is the 21st Century Community Learning Center that's been longstanding that we've done in Tennessee for a while, and it provides federal funding to establish or expand community learning centers. And the centers provide students with opportunities academic enrichment, youth development, family supports, out of school hours, and during periods of time when schools are not in session. So this normally has been funded from the U.S. Department of Education, and the responsibility for the administration of the program has been transferred to state agencies under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The second one is a state investment, and we're fortunate in Tennessee that the General Assembly has established a law in Tennessee that some of the profits from the Tennessee lottery, the state lottery, is used for specific educational programs, and a few of those, the programs that it funds is college scholarships, early childhood education, also after school programming. So we are very fortunate in Tennessee to have that. And in accordance with that law, the portion of those proceeds are deposited into an after-school fund, and 100% of those funds have to go out to school districts for the administration of the after-school program through a competitive grant process. Those two programs run parallel. One of the things that we want to be sure of is that whether the school LEAs or community-based organizations are applying for those grants, it is competitive, but we want to make sure that the quality of the programming is high in both cases, and that they run pretty parallel in their mission as well. So it has helped add some capacity to after-school programs in Tennessee, has benefited lots and lots of students. So our LEAP, I think that this past year, we've had 194 sites that are funded through the 21st Century, I believe, and the LEAP. The LEAPS program also, it serves about 18,000 students. So we are, I'll make sure I get those statistics right. But anyway, we do serve lots of students through that program. Again, high quality programs. Both of those support academic supports, also non-academic supports. So obviously, literacy has been a huge focus. It has been for a long time, but some additional focus on literacy in Tennessee over the last few years, and making sure that that's embedded in there, as well as opportunities, physical activity requirements in there with the program, and even support and healthy nutrition choices and things like that are embedded in both of those programs. The other two more recent investments, and if you will, just the initiatives, one of them is a less permanent, temporary, but has been really, really effective. We have a Tennessee All-Core program that was established through the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act, and that was in 2021. That was kind of a pandemic recovery, learning loss recovery, if you will, and that's been successful. Districts give us great feedback on that. It is a tutoring program targeted to with students to recover learning loss, and it is aligned with core instructional materials, making sure that students have access to and it's related very much aligned to regular classroom extension of classroom instruction during the school day. So that is one that it's set to sunset after this school year, and that's been one of the programs that school districts have been saying, okay, this has been a success. You know, what can we do to maybe extend funding or advocate for continued funding there? And then the last one was also established through the Tennessee Learning Loss Act, and it is the establishment of summer learning camps for students at rising kindergartners through rising ninth graders. And that is a permanent fund through the Department of Education that provides students with learning camps 4 to 6 weeks. There are some specific things there that have to be required, that also serves as outside of school during the summertime programs for students, again, aligned to classroom instructions, academic instruction, as well as putting in place for, the physical activity and some opportunities for students to work together, problem solve. That runs concurrent with a STEM learning camp that our students in lower grades also experience, and that's been well received among educators, school districts, parents, and that is a permanent fund going forward. So those are some state that's a state initiative and state funded initiative there, along with the LEAPS program that will continue on with the investments in Tennessee.
Thank you, Christy. I do have a follow-up question there. So you're talking about statewide implementations that's covering rural communities, urban communities, underserved populations of students. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced with the implementation and how maybe they were previously addressed, or what you're currently doing now that you know you have funding moving forward as well?
Yes, and so when we have I can talk about some of the I guess current challenges and some implementation things. I'll speak from, again, my lens as a school district leader. We had some challenges with transportation, and so we tried to address that by providing transportation where we could. And maybe it wasn't as I was in a rural district, really, housing was really spread out, and trying to get those locations that were convenient for parents to be able to pick their students up, or where we could take them home. That was a challenge when we started participating in some of the grants. Just, again, a practical standpoint. And then I think that the more recent thing statewide that we've seen is some staffing issues. Teachers are tired, they're working hard, and they have a lot of responsibility that they do during the school day, and a lot of things going on there. And so the staffing is a little bit of a challenge, and has been. I think that it was maybe with 21st Century and the LEAPS grant, when Tennessee All Core was added, and then the summer programming, that really added some capacity too. So that also required more staffing to be able to do that. So that is where I believe that our community-based organizations come in and can help really fill that need. So that's certainly been a challenge. And I think that the demand for after school programming is always there, and it exceeds what we're able to provide sometimes. And so I think that's just an ongoing challenge that we can perhaps use to use some data and information that we can use to continue to advocate for these programs.
Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate you. Dr. Townsend Smith, let's shift over to you. So the Dudley Flood Center has centered engagement and that cross-sector collaboration to address system injustices that threaten the equitable access to an education system to support that social, emotional, and physical well-being of students. In your experience, how do you collaborate with local schools, districts, and other stakeholders to ensure that alignment and coordination between in and out of school learning experiences is there?
Thank you so much for that question, Christy. I think that's a great question. And I think in this work at the Dudley Flood Center, we firmly believe in this effort of co-creating. Mm-hmm. When you co-create, I think it is easier to truly determine the needs of whatever community that you're in. And when you co-create, people are often more willing to invite you to the table. So that has proven to be beneficial for us in our work. It's just the inviting in and helping people to co-create. And what we also believe in this philosophy of representation. Representation matters. So as we are going about this train of co-creation, we make sure that we have the right people at the table, even those voices that some may think do not need to be at the table. Those are the ones that are influencing community the most, and especially students, right? Students are the ones who are experiencing this thing we call education, whether it's in school, before school, or after school, because school doesn't stop with the bell, quite frankly. And I think this piece of making sure that students have opportunity and access that extend beyond school, it just helps to further their learning opportunities and gives them greater access and opportunity. So for us, it is important to convene. It is important to have representation. It is important to co-create so that we are not creating things for people, we're creating things with people so that students have what they need and so that things are equitable. This also helps, and what we found to be beneficial, this also helps with people really having the opportunity to maintain their dignity, respect, and well-being, and for their voices to be heard in the spaces that serve them each and every day.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend-Smith. Can you expand a little bit more on what it takes to foster those successful partnerships? So Christy mentioned community-based organizations and building off of those partnerships, and so did you. So can you talk about a little bit of what it takes to foster those partnerships?
I think it is being willing to engage in conversation and taking the opportunity to listen, and not going in with a perceived program recommendation, really taking the time to listen, convene as many times as you need to. And when there are opportunities to, change the course based on the data that you are seeing, based on trends that you're seeing, you can help model for people what this looks like and the value of engaging a diverse educator workforce, because that's not workforce, a diverse stakeholder group to be involved in each of these pieces. So I think the convening component, the engaging in conversations, and then having the ability to develop a plan together and truly helping to implement that plan. And when people see that you're willing to truly be a partner, that you're not trying to create something that truly doesn't benefit their community, the more it benefits students each and every day. So ultimately, this piece around how do we go about this work? It is making sure that we're taking the time to ensure we have the right people at the table. And sometimes it starts with us inviting a small group. And from the small group, that group invites other members into the conversation, into the space, so that things are developed that are beneficial for the community that's being served.
Thank you for that nod to collaborating. Appreciate it. Zelda, can we shift to you? So talking about ensuring how your after-school programs are culturally responsive and inclusive of diverse student populations or students with diverse needs.
Sure. Thank you, Kristen. First, let me add that the South Carolina After School Alliance is a statewide nonprofit organization, but we're a part of the 50 statewide networks across the nation. So there is a statewide after school alliance or group in all 50 states. And so in South Carolina, we are comprised of a network of over 1,700 after school and summer programs in all 46 counties, impacting 100,000 students. So that's more students than the largest school district in the state of South Carolina. So getting back to our question, how do we ensure that after-school programs are culturally responsive? I think some key strategies to ensuring programs are culturally responsive and inclusive are to increase access, make sure your programs are youth-centric, and skills development. So for increasing access, you want to make sure you create strategies that address barriers to participation and build on the experiences within the community. And for your youth-centric, incorporate strategies that build on the specific strengths, needs, and challenges of youth. And for skills development, I would say to incorporate strategies that are personally relevant to youth and enable them to develop STEM and 21st century skills. These strategies should include professional development for staff, relevance, community engagement, data-informed decision-making, intentional program quality design, positive youth development, peer support, and mentors that look like them.
Awesome. Thank you, Zelda. Can you also expand a little bit more of what the experience is of the students and families participating in your programs? We know qualitative data is always really important for budgeting and for finance, but what about some of the quantitative data that's associated with the significance of why these are so important?
Sure. One example that comes to mind specifically that has benefited parents and students is our biomaterial summer camp for rising 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students of color from very rural areas. So over 5 to 6 weeks during the summer, students reside on campus at an historically Black college or university, and they're matched with a mentor research professor that looks like them. And they work side by side in a research lab with their mentor, creating a top flight learning experiences and ensuring that more students have access. The program is relevant to the students, community, and families, and it helps to bolster academic outcomes. And lastly, it empowers the students.
Thank you, Zelda. Appreciate it. So kind of getting back to why we have these three incredible panelists here. I think one of the things that we know to be true is what strategies have we found effective in engaging those parents and families in those after school programs. So I think, again, building off of what Zelda said, how can we ensure that we have engagement when a program is present? Because we know it's a chicken and egg, right? Like you can't end up having policy for it and then they're not used, but then if they're used and then we can't get to policy. So to anyone on the panel right now, can you talk about that significant relationship?
I guess I can start in response to that question. I think like before school and after school opportunities are different than like our engagement with like the normal school day, in that parents or those guardians are picking up and dropping off students each and every day. So you get an opportunity to engage with those that are providing care and support in a unique way that you don't often get going into the school building. Like usually at the school building, you're dropping them off at the door. But for after school and before school, you are dropping off and picking up. And so you're able to engage in conversations. And because of the interactions during those programs, there are opportunities to build relationships in unique ways based on student interest, based on those things that they love. And while the school day can be fun for some students, for others, it is not a fun. Some of those spaces aren't places where they thrive. And so the after school and before school opportunities provide them with an opportunity to express themselves in a different way without the constraints of the normal school day. So I think that the parent engagement component within those programs offer a number of opportunities to foster collaboration, to foster building relationships, just because of the nature of parents dropping them off before they go to work and picking them up after they get off work.
I can probably add to that just from the experience that we've had, but raising awareness about what's available and including those students and what those are, whether it's through conversation or surveys or whatever that may be, and that they really can see that there's responsiveness because of the conversations and the asks that we've taken into consideration, the things that we've asked and the answers they've given, that they can see the results from that. So I think making that really meaningful interactions. Also, I will say that if you can catch those parents in a car line, it's for, helping getting those students in the cars and, getting them out and ready. I mean, and it's regular interaction too. So it may be short pieces, but if you can be a little bit intentional about what we're trying to make them aware of or get feedback on, that a lot can be accomplished during that time. And also be mindful of when we're engaging groups of parents as a whole too, and making that accessible for them at times that they can come in, and making sure that's really meaningful time if you're going to call a group together like that. So taking advantage of any of the times that we have, even if it seems in passing, can be really important conversations to make those connections with parents and students and the guardians and caretakers of these students regularly. So.
I would just like to add that, everything that's been said is just, right on the money in regards to connecting with parents. I would definitely encourage the school to utilize after-school programs to engage parents, because most of the time you have after-school staff, they are from the community. They intimately know the families. They go to church with the families. They are engaged in other activities, sports, and other things with families and children. So if nothing else, really utilize after school and summer programs to reach those parents that you may not normally be able to reach.
Thank you, all three of you, for your thoughtful answers and showing kind of different approaches to each. We do have a couple of questions about, surprising no one, funding coming up. But before we get into that, think kind of bigger picture with policymakers. So what steps do you think, based on your experiences and what you've seen in successful implementation, what can policymakers prioritize funding for in after-school programs? We know they have benefits, but how can we reach policymakers to get them to buy in?
I think that, to Zelda's earlier point around each of the states having being a part of this larger collaborative across the nation, like tapping into having those policymakers tap into being on those boards to see what is actually needed is a great strategy that we use often in our space. I know that our in North Carolina is our NCCAP here in North Carolina that handles that work here in North Carolina. And I think there are a variety of different resources that, if we can use common resources to elevate the issues, such as like the roadmap of need that they highlight on their website, and a variety of different research-based components, using those things to engage in the necessary conversations on the issues that we know are relevant, because ultimately at the end of the day, we don't need another report. We know what the issues are. And by providing them with the capacity of building their capacity to understand and backing that up with data that is relevant to support that issue, often helps to have maybe not the largest wins that we want to increase funding, but small wins along the way that ultimately gets us to that final goal.
Mm-hmm.
Say, just building on what Dr. Townsend Smith has said, number one, the statewide after-school networks, they are a great resource for states. They cover the entire state. For us, we try to be innovative in some cases. Sometimes you need to make it a little personal. Find out if the legislators have children in after-school programs. Invite them to an after-school program to showcase what after-school is doing, because in some legislators think that after-school may be still a babysitting. But after-school has evolved so much. I mean, we are addressing economic development, college and career readiness, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or for some STEAM, adding the arts. So making sure they understand, the importance of after school, but also the benefits to the community. And if you have parents, I look at it like this: for every child, you have at least two people. Doesn't necessarily have to be parents. It can be an aunt, uncle, whomever, a caregiver that supports that child. Now you're talking about their constituents. And so when you look at how many constituents do you have in this area, and how many students are in that after-school program, now you're talking about votes. And so I think that is you have to really be, strategic and innovative when you are approaching these legislators, because everyone is approaching them.
So that's a great segue into, so we're talking about kind of now like statewide top down, right? What is it? And it's always top down, bottom up, right? Meeting in the middle. So we're talking about engaging with policymakers, bringing in community leaders, other stakeholders to raise awareness about the importance of investing in after school and out of school programs. Where have you seen success in supporting students with that holistic development and bringing everyone to the table to kind of continue to get momentum forward in programming?
I think the awareness, again, I think that's a great strategy. What you just said is find the champions for either after school programming or the things that it's connected to and has evolved into, very much academic and other things that they may care about, and bring those folks together, back it up with the data. We do have a Tennessee After School Network that, promotes the after school since it's what Zelda said, it does bring community-based organizations together, along with school districts that are providing these things, and really I think highlighting that and celebrating the innovative work and the things that students are experiencing, and bringing that to legislators that, like I said, they either champion after school to start with, which is always great, or it aligns with something else that they really care about. And we've been fortunate in Tennessee, so let me say that. I mean, we've clearly made some statewide investments in to expand our after school and summer programming. And so I want to say that we're fortunate here that we clearly do have folks who care a lot about it and have, supported legislation to expand it and build capacity in that area.
Great. Thank you, Christy. Appreciate it. One of the questions, we'll jump into the Q&A from the audience. So we're talking in particular about how after-school programs can be tailored to meet unique needs of both diverse student populations and then students, and including those with disabilities, students with disabilities or English language learners. So how can we, how can after-school programs support those?
I think it goes back to that earlier point. I think we've all hit on this a little bit, is that after school has an ability to open up opportunity and access for a variety of different students in a number of different ways, because sometimes they're in school buildings, sometimes they're not. And I think that just creates a unique experience. And then while this question is particularly focused on like students with special needs, I also think that sometimes our gifted students have special needs that we often forget about. And so like this, like before and after school opens up an opportunity for access to more rigorous courses outside of the school day. And so I just think that that's just very beneficial, that these programs have that within their wheelhouse to offer from a number of different perspectives.
I think that in the programmatic piece, when we are having the oversight of these applications and approvals, monitoring that type of thing, is to keep it flexible enough that it can reflect the needs of the community that it serves. And while of course being able to put some guidelines and guardrails in place that every bit of that funding is spent in a way that benefits those students. But again, having the flexibility in the programmatic piece of it to serve whatever the needs that it may be. That it may be English learners in certain communities. It may be other groups of students. And I appreciate gifted students or higher performing students being brought up in this conversation too. We want to make sure that the needs of all the students are being met as the greatest extent possible. So I think it needs to reflect what the community needs, what those students need, and keeping that piece flexible enough that the participants can do that.
Thank y'all. We have a couple of other questions. We have a couple of other questions that are popping up about kind of that accountability and evaluation component, as well as innovation here. So if it's okay with you, we're going to shift to some of the Q&A from the chat. And let's kind of kick off with the impact evaluation. So how do you kind of center your programs around that impact evaluation when considering that growth to drive towards policymakers understanding this investment into their communities? So how can we evaluate what's going on in a way that will, it's almost like make your case, right? For this is something that we should continue to invest in.
So I'll take a stab at this question. One of the things that I think that is helpful in regards to data is the quantitative and qualitative data to collect. You know, after school, sometimes it's challenging to collect data because it takes a while to see the impact of the work that you're doing. And so it's so important to even capture data that is, the data that can lead to the impact of the programs. And so, collecting information, collecting information on scenarios and experiences that students have shared. Also, getting the voice of the students and allowing them to share how the program and the services of the program have impacted them personally, as well as parents. I think that's been very impactful for us.
And I think like to just add on to the pieces that Zelda has so eloquently stated, student voice is truly important. I think it helps to tell the stories of student experiences, and collecting data that is not like always the numbers is often the most compelling research that we can collect. And so just making sure that because all the programs have like core competencies that they follow or that they're trying to achieve within the programs. And so with those core competencies, making sure that as respective programs are built, that they're they're built to address each of those core competencies. It helps you to establish the evaluation process and how you're going to collect that data so that you have the appropriate people there to collect that, to ultimately show the impact of the program. Some of the data that could be overlooked are just like the student engagement part of that. I think like that's an often point that we don't often capture is the students' engagement, how they are responding, just their sense of well-being, their sense of being safe in the programs are important data points to collect as well. But ultimately, in the day, the core competencies drive the program evaluation that's produced, I know, at least from our NCCAP counterparts.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So thinking through, now it's kind of the elephant in the room with funding, right? So we have all of these questions about innovation. We're going to shift in, I think, more individually right now to what kind of the funding formulas look like and where you've seen successes in your individual roles. So Christy, how have the shifting funding formulas and those budgetary constraints impacted your support and operation of after-school programming? We all know that in the wake of the pandemic and now ESSER funding kind of coming to its cliff, where have you, how has this impacted?
So again, that's right. It will be impacted because we did have the ESSER funding, relief funding that allowed for more capacity. And I think that that's become something that that parents, students, schools have come to rely on. I think everybody knows that this funding was, temporary, not going to last forever. but it has allowed us to build some capacity there. Again, it's I think I talked about just a very specific a challenge that I had in a rural district was around transportation, and that kind of funding was used to be able to battle that and to actually just address it outright. And so I think that having some plans in place of how do you still keep the very best and what made those programs work or better with the funding going away, if you will, is something that all of us have to think about. With our summer program, with the legislative action there to put permanent funding in place for that. Again, a lot of that has been addressed, and of course, probably not all of the demand for it, but has certainly helped. And the way that we do ours is like it's an application process, and then we take our total allocation that we have available, and then we do like a per pupil amount. And Tennessee overall in its regular state funding of education has moved to a per pupil expenditure as well. So it kind of mirrors that based on the total allocation that we have available. And then of course, schools are LEAs and community-based organizations are prioritized on criteria that are met with either, the level of economically disadvantaged students and other factors that are in play there. So again, just hopefully, people have thought of plans ahead of time, had some foresight in how to keep the very best of the things that were made more robust or improved upon as we go, and that we will be able to find more ways to do that, advocate for that through. Okay, I think the strategy on the data presenting too is I like the strategy I like to see with, and I think that it's effective with presenting the data, the numbers. People want to see that, what's the money, what's the outcomes, those type of things, but always to pair that up with a strategy around in context. What's the stories behind that? Let's see what, those experiences are for students and for families and the impact that it has. So I think pairing just the data up with in context and real stories of the impact that it's had can maybe influence what happens there with continued funding or more robust funding for it.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate it. Let's shift Dr. Townsend-Smith. So in continuing with this discussion of funding, how do you typically go about engaging local stakeholders to leverage their funding or support resources that contribute to that after-school funding?
For us, how we typically go about this is some of the pieces that Christy just lifted up around making sure that we tell the stories. Stories truly do matter. And I think like having consistent data points that you're always pointing to that people know are reliable sources of data has proven to be helpful for us in conversations around funding. The piece that is how we're often a resource for people is in the piece of advocacy. So maybe they don't necessarily know who to advocate to or where to advocate, just pointing them in the right directions and then just helping to shape pieces that truly call out what the needs are and why they are the needs, and pointing to like, it's just not an issue in this state. This actually shows up in a number of different areas so that people can see like, we're just not trying to get something because we think that it's something that we only need. But most often what we find is that when one student needs it, there are a lot of other students that need it as well. And so being able to make connections to the appropriate policymakers so that people know who to advocate to and what to advocate for, and then how to go about establishing those protocols so that they're not reaching out to someone so that their message or their point of advocacy falls on deaf ears, and then building coalitions so that the advocacy comes from a larger group rather than just an individual, shifts the focus from just the selfish side of things, such as this is an I need and most often a we need, has proven to be beneficial for us.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend-Smith. Zelda, we're going to close out with one with you, and then we have an incredible question from Esther in the audience at the Q&A that kind of ties everything together. So Zelda, in your role, there are a lot of moving parts in strategizing that resource allocation. So how do you prioritize the competing needs and interests within your organization to ensure that those resources are allocated in a manner that maximizes impact for students and families and anyone participating in the program in the community?
So, you know, we're really going to have a challenge, you know, after the American Rescue Plan funds disappear in September. Governor McMaster actually allocated the Governor Emergency Education Relief Funds, about $4 million to us, as well as the Department of Education allocated $14 million to after-school programs. And it was very, very helpful. I am just very concerned about, you know, what's going to happen after September. And it looks like my co-panelists, especially Tennessee, has been very successful in securing funds. So I may be reaching out to Christy about coming to South Carolina. I think that's a strategy. If it's working somewhere else, reaching out to colleagues and getting them to connect to the Department of Education here to provide information on what has worked there and why they are continuing it. Also, I think from our perspective, one thing that we're looking at is the investment of businesses and how after school is going to play a major impact on economic development. If we're going to bring companies to our state, then we need to prepare young people to be employees or entrepreneurs or what have you, to prepare them for these jobs. And so I think one strategy is approaching our business leaders, approaching corporations to talk about how we can prepare students for college and career.
Thank you, Zelda. You teed up our audience Q&A very well here. So Esther's asking, can any of the panelists speak more about that specific school and business collaboration in both before and after school programming and how that contributes to that workforce development continuum?
So we have what South Carolina has a profile of a South Carolina graduate, where it outlines the skills, competencies, and characteristics, which is a part of 21st century workforce skills. You know, ethics, leadership, collaboration. One thing that we have done is we have taken that profile and created competencies that connect to digital badges. And so these digital badges, students are able to show that they are mastering these digital badges. Companies want to know, companies want employees who have a good work ethic, who understands collaboration, who understands partnership, who understands critical thinking, problem solving. And so those skills are incorporated into our digital badges. I would definitely show how you are contributing to the workforce. As I mentioned earlier, we have, so in addition to that, we also have partnered with higher education, because during the pandemic, and this happened actually during the pandemic, that the after-school staff was scarce. And so we created a course that would help undergraduate students teach the digital badges to after-school participants. So they would go through the course as a professional development, and then we place them in after-school programs to teach those 21st century workforce skills. So that's one way we've tried to be creative in showing businesses our impact and how we're contributing to economic development in South Carolina.
Thank you, Zelda. Christy, Dr. Townsend Smith, do you have anything that you would talk about with that kind of continuum into workforce?
Not directly, other than just to reiterate the piece that Zelda lifted up around the portrait of a graduate. North Carolina has something similar that I know that our after-school network often lifts up and incorporates into their work. And I think that those are great competencies and skills that everyone needs to make sure that they're fully prepared for the workforce. There is a direct correlation between preparation in throughout your K-12 experience that follows you through higher ed as well, that ultimately prepares you for the workforce. So I would just reiterate the portrait of the graduate profile here in North Carolina as well.
I think that we do have, partnerships, or individual school districts and community-based organizations do have partnerships with businesses and folks that help, even help sponsor some of these things. I also think in Tennessee, we have worked on bringing down this workforce career awareness, career exploration down into the lower grades, and some exposure, even elementary schools, and then starting to focus on that more. Even in some coursework with elementary or with middle school age students. And so I think there may be an opportunity there to have some of those after school experiences, really to reach out and even solicit those opportunities, from the school districts and organizations that participate in after school programs. To maybe that's an opportunity for us to build on and really expose those students to what's available in where they live and maybe in those regions. So I think that there seems like there may be an opportunity there to collect some information around that, what's going on, and then how can we maybe reach out to those folks and create stronger partnerships.
Thank you all so much for fielding so many questions from the audience. We really appreciate answering them real time too. So to close out, we want to be forward thinking. So we've talked about the program development, we've talked about all of the different budgetary constraints or promising practices, but thinking forward, what emerging trends do you see shaping after school programming? Like, how can stakeholders adapt to meet that evolving student and family need in today's complex educational landscape?
So one unique initiative that we are implementing this coming year is a partnership with the Department of Mental Health. And we are partnering with them to provide services to students through after school. And so the Department of Mental Health has offered their clinicians across the state to work with us. Not that we want to provide mental health services to them, but hopefully we can train our after-school providers on mental health first aid so they can identify those needs or services that's needed. And then we work with the Department of Mental Health to address those with their parents. And so I think that's one unique opportunity that we have and are really moving forward with it. So I think other than also working with businesses and being innovative, I think that our biomaterial program that we have, we would like to expand that to cybersecurity and to other areas that's important to those communities, and give those students in that community an opportunity to, learn those skills.
And I think like just to expand on that, I think ultimately continue the place for experiences in these programs to be places where students want to be, because culture truly does matter. I can't be the equity person on this panel and not mention that. So like that's just that's truly important. Like continue to foster a community of learners, and like this piece around when we're talking about a portrait of a graduate, like those are areas and things that you can capitalize on so that students have the opportunity and are encouraged to take risk, and that you continue to foster like safe spaces where you are developing it within children a healthy respect for differences, because that will help to maintain and for them to continue to carry forward this thing called democracy that we have in our nation. Thank you.
I think continue to be responsive again to what the students in that community needs, and bring the right stakeholders around the same table to talk about that in future planning of programs and opportunities that students get through the after school programs is always going to be a way to stay on top of what those needs are, and again promote that student participation, student voice, and the things that they want to participate in. And the other thing I want to say too is we talk about academic and non-academic. So I think that alignment of after school programs and making sure that's a coherent thing from what they're learning in their classroom, with literacy and math and those things, that it's coherent with what's going on after school. But I think there's an opportunity here to bring coherence as well to this. Well, I would argue maybe it's academic also. I'm a chief academic officer, so I guess that's where my lens is coming from. But make sure that when we're talking about these experiences we talked about with workforce and businesses and outside partners, but find a way is it is relevant to make that relevant for that student. So what we're learning in class, what we're learning after school is related and relevant to those experiences that we're having outside of schools, and to stress that those things are aligned and open opportunities for students, and to, I guess, have them make that connection with other stakeholders as well.
Christy, Zelda, Dr. Townsend-Smith, thank you so much for your time today, and for your insights in such a broad range of experience and your forward-thinking hopes for after school and out of school programming. We cannot thank you enough for your time, and for our audience for coming in. May is a busy month for graduation and closing out school, and we are excited and grateful for you prioritizing this time today. So before closing today's discussion, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you we have some other really cool webinars coming up. So our next conversation is held on Thursday, June 20th, 2 p.m. Eastern again. We're going to discuss the importance of family-school partnerships, so especially over the summer months, building off of this conversation today. So we have the information and links up here. We'll drop the registration link in the webinar, or to the webinar in the chat. And then we also encourage you to join us for our July webinar, which will also cover navigating work-based learning strategies. So with that, thank you again for your time, and we hope to see you soon. All right, bye y'all.